A very good morning to all. I'm Dr. Anupama Janardhanan, Pediatric Ophthalmology Fellow at Arvind Eye Hospital, Madurai. I'll be talking in brief about this interesting topic, retrobulbar neuritis, the irony of which is when both the doctor and the patient does not see. No financial disclosure. What do we know about retrobulbar neuritis? We know that it's inflammation of retrobulbar portion of the optic nerve prior to the entrance of central retinal artery. Commonly, it presents with diminution of vision, and most importantly, we'll see a clinically normal or near normal fundus picture, along with all other features of optic nerve involvement. Going back in literature, what I found was severity of attack had a direct relationship with visual prognosis. And I wanted to find out whether this was true in the study, in the sample I studied. Also, a poorer life expectancy was seen with in cases that had already gotten retrobulbar neuritis, especially affecting later decades. Retrobulbar neuritis also can be an indicator for multiple sclerosis in comparison to papillitis. More patients affected with retrobulbar neuritis were found to have brain parenchymal lesions, classifying to be in cases of multiple sclerosis. Now, how did we evaluate the patients who had presented to us? It was a retrospective study of 60 eyes done over the period of 2 years, where the demographic, clinical features, and neuroimaging features were taken into account. They all received standard treatment with IV methylprednisolone 500 milligram BD for 3 days, followed by oral steroids 1 milligram per kg for 11 days. And these patients were subjected to descriptive and analytical statistics. Now, what did we find? We specifically took those cases who were radiologically and clinically diagnosed to be cases of retrobulbar neuritis. And we found an array of wide range of patients ranging between 12 to 66 years of age. Female preponderance was found, and the cases were bilateral in about 20% of all the eyes. Visual acuity present at the time of presentation had a moderate vision loss in 38% patients and severe vision loss in 31% patients. Following IVMP, at day 3, improvement was noted in about 58%, and a better improvement was noted by 1 month in about 85% patients. Now, of specific interest is the atypical presentation of various retrobulbar neuritis cases. 7% were noted to not have any color vision abnormality checked with Ishihara's charts, and about 4% patients did not demonstrate any subjective pupillary change in reaction. The characteristic feature of pain on eye movements was absent in 65% of cases. Coming to the fundus picture, we were able to find that about 73% patients had a normal, near normal looking disc appearance. Only 20% showed hyperemic disc, which was characterized by preservation of cup disc ratio and minimal elevation and almost insignificant margin blurring. And also 7% cases presented for the first time with defective vision with temporal pallor. Now, the statistical significance that was noted was the patients who presented early had a better visual acuity at 1 month. Also, the older patients had higher chances of developing disc pallor on 1 month evaluation. There was no statistical significance between gender and the final visual outcome. Also, there was no significance between gender and fundus appearance. What was known in literature priorly, the severity of involvement or the drop in vision in comparison to the visual outcome was not found in our study, probably attributed to the shorter duration of follow-up. Discussing broadly, also quoting George Eliot, it was said that whatever is behind the barn door, we won't be able to see it. That is the same with retrobulbar neuritis also. What we are unable to see, there's a high possibility we might not pick it up, and it get pushed around as either amblyopia, especially when they're present with just one line vision loss. Moving on, so what we knew was female preponderance. We confirmed that multiple sclerosis has been commonly documented to be the case of to be the etiology of retrobulbar neuritis in our study. Probably because most of the patients did not have an associated systemic feature in their first presentation. Multiple sclerosis was just secondary to idiopathic. Also, fundus appearance was normal in literature in about 64%, almost similar to what we found. And we did not find any relation between severity and prognosis. Now to conclude, Retrobulbar neuritis is a silent vision-threatening disease with systemic implication. Etiology is myriad and we are still counting. Atypical features such as may or may not have pupillary involvement, color vision may just present with mild desaturation, and even a one-line loss can have an underlying retrobulbar neuritis. To emphasize, the first-line warriors, such as an intern posted in ophthalmology department or a junior resident, for the fact a midline of ophthalmic assistant posted in periphery must be trained to identify it at the earliest and do a prompt referral, not only to treat the condition but also to evaluate and put a pin on the systemic association. At the least, we will be able to also give a visual prognosis depending upon the presentation and the 1 month fundus picture to the patient. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from Dr. Anupama?
You had a few patients who had disc pallor.
Yes, sir.
Did you ask about the previous history of vision loss? Because sometimes the subclinical optic neuritis just was there in the past, and that can cause a little bit of optic atrophy.
Yes, sir. The reason why we included only those cases that had presented for the first time with vision loss was to also take into account the subclinical optic neuritis. That's what we are also emphasizing on. They had
no. My question is, like, when we have a disc pallor,
yes,
that there is a possibility that the subclinical attack had already taken place in the past, and this could be a second attack. So how did you rule that out?
Sir, all these patients were specifically asked on retrospect whether they had any prior episode of defective vision, acute onset associated with pain. They had denied it and they had presented for the first time. Only those cases were taken, sir, not the ones which previously had an episode of defective vision.
You were just basically relying on the history.
Yeah. Maybe, sir. Maybe they might not be.
Like the patients who had hyperemia, were they subjected to fluorescein angiography to look for disc edema?
So not all cases were subjected to FFA, sir.
No, those who had hyperemia, because we're talking about RBN, whether the disc has to be absolutely normal. So you've picked up some patients who had hyperemia.
No, sir. They were not subjected to FFA, sir.
So FFA was not a protocol for it.
No, yeah, sir. Only neuroradiological imaging was done, sir.
Okay.
I just had a question, Dr. Anupama, regarding maybe older patients and the possibility of ruling out ischemic optic neuropathy. Because one of the fundus photographs of disc pallor looked like a altitudinal kind of a pallor as well.
Yes,
so,
sir.
How many of your patients had coexisting diabetes, and how many of them were, say, over 45, 50 years of age? Was there?
Yes, sir. About 20% of them also had associated diabetes and hypertension. However, the radiological aspect was more gratifying in our case. We were able to take that into account since profound retrobulbar optic nerve thickening and edema is not a feature of ischemic optic neuropathy. We were able to term it into retrobulbar neuritis.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.